Some of the most important political issues deal with reforming the very way our government works. Issues like the abolition of the filibuster, removal of the Electoral College, or campaign finance reform all get attention from political candidates and media outlets. But there's another government reform policy that's worth taking a look at: expanding the House of Representatives. To put it simply, the House of Representatives doesn't have enough members in order to properly represent the interests of the people. When the Constitution was originally ratified in 1790, there were 65 members of the House of Representatives. Each representative had about 34,000 constituents. Today, with 435 members of the House, each representative has about 762,000 constituents. How did we get here? Congress originally had the power to change the amount of seats in the House as the population of America increased. The number of representatives gradually grew, eventually reaching 435 in 1911. In 1929, the Republican government passed the Reapportionment Act, capping the number of representatives at 435. At that point, each member of the House represented about 280,000 constituents. To this day, the House still has 435 representatives, completely unchanged since 1929. There's a lot of issues with being unable to change the amount of representatives. As the population of the United States has grown over the last 93 years, the amount of representatives has stayed the same. The amount of constituents per representatives will only continue to increase. Look at this graph. Although earlier on there was a steady increase in the amount of constituents per representative, the growth exploded when the number of Congress members was capped. This trend is projected to continue as America's population grows, with the average representative having 874,000 constituents by 2040. This trend will make it continually harder for representatives to connect with their constituents. It's a lot easier to represent 100,000 people compared to 1 million. And representatives will only continue to fall out of touch with what their district needs and wants. Americans can't make their voices heard when they're being drowned out by 700,000 other people. More districts would allow citizens to make their opinions heard on the federal level. Imagine an America where you could actually connect with your representative, where you can make sure your voice is heard. It's also worth noting that the US has more constituents per district than most other Western democracies. With about 750,000 people per seat, the US is far ahead of second place Japan at only 272,000. Just as a fun side note, Iceland only has about 5,000 people per representative. The amount of districts also changes who runs for Congress. The larger a district is, the more expensive it will be to execute a successful campaign, since there are more voters to contact and convince. Often, only wealthier candidates can properly fund their campaigns. This sends disproportionately extremely rich people to Congress, which often do not understand the struggles of working in middle-class Americans. With smaller districts, citizens that are more connected with their local community could run a successful campaign for less money, decreasing special interest and giving their district someone who's connected with their constituents. For a final point, if you aren't convinced, there's extreme variation between the size of the current districts. Before 2020 redistricting, Montana's at-large district had 994,000 people residing inside of it. Rhode Island's average district had 526,000 people. 1.8 times as many people lived in Montana as the average Rhode Island district, but each only got one representative. If the House increased its members, you would see much less variation between the number of constituents per district. But what are the different ways we could increase the House? One commonly proposed way is to add the amount that has been removed from states every time redistricting has occurred, in order to make sure a state never loses representation. 149 seats have changed hands since the implementation of the Reapportionment Act, so this proposal would suggest adding 149 seats, plus one more to make sure that we would maintain an odd number to avoid ties. Every 10 years when redistricting occurs, seats are added in order to ensure states don't lose representatives. Another way is the Wyoming rule. This plan suggests that the smallest state should get one seat in the House of Representatives, and whatever their population be should be the average number of people per representative. The smallest state, Wyoming, has about 570,000 constituents, so the average representative would represent about 570,000 people. This would add about 139 seats to the Congress, and seats would be added as the smallest state continues to make up less and less of the United States population. A slightly stranger way to look at it is through the cube root law, which would add 258 seats. The cube root law states that in order to determine the size a Congress should be, you should take the cube root of the nation. The cube root of America's population is 693, so the House would have 693 members. Countries like Canada and Denmark are pretty close to the cube root law, while Lithuania follows it exactly. In conclusion, maybe a law from the 1920s shouldn't be undermining the People's House.